Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Melissa Simpson. I'm the audience engagement editor at Next City, and I'm so glad you are all here. So today, joining us for the webinar, we have Carter Lavin from the author of If You Want to Win, You've Got to Fight, A Guide to Effective Transportation Advocacy. Before we get started, I do want to mention a few housekeeping notes. First, as I see a couple people are doing already, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Say hi, your name, where you're from, and where you work, and maybe what industry you work in as well, if you're open to that. And before we jump in, oh, another housekeeping note. This webinar will be recorded and it'll be available for viewing by Friday at nextcity.org/webinars. And before we jump into the webinar, I do want to mention that we are currently doing our end of year fundraiser at Next City. We are aiming to raise $31,000 by December 31st. That money will help us to produce more webinars like this one today. Thanks to the Newsmatch campaign, the first $5,000 in monthly gifts committed by the end of the year will be matched for an entire year. So if you already made a donation towards today's webinar, thank you so much. And if you haven't, there's still plenty of time to make a contribution to help us reach that $31,000 goal. And it can be a one-time contribution or a monthly contribution starting as low as $5 a month. And if you were interested in doing that, you can visit nextcity.org/donate. Now, to give you a little bit about Carter, I will go ahead and read his bio. Carter Lavin is a climate and transportation activist who helps organizations and individuals hone strategies and build political power. Carter has directly supported and trained nonprofits, candidates, grassroots groups, businesses, and hundreds of individuals to win on the issues that matter to them at a local, regional, and state level. He has written for Streets Blog and Convergence Magazine. He lives in Oakland, California, and is the founder of the transportation advocacy group Trans Bay Coalition, and he also designed the board game Serious Mischief. And Carter's book actually drops tomorrow. It's not officially out yet. I do have my copy, but you can purchase his book tomorrow at Island Press. And for all the links that I mentioned today, I will drop them below, including the link to Carter's book. Without further ado, Carter, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa, for having me. Thank you so much, Next City, for being part of this. And thank you all so much for tuning in, for spending some of your time with me today to talk about how you can win more on the fights that you want to win about. So let me get my slide deck ready and let's get going. So we're going to do a brief guide to becoming a more effective transportation advocate, which my book is the written version of this. That goes into a lot more depth with a lot more examples, but we're going to do the fast version. And this is from a very successful rally earlier this year. We had 5 days to pull it off. We got $750 million from the state of California for transit as part of that whole campaign. So you already put in the chat your names, locations. If folks are up for putting in, we'll do more intros or something there. We're going to talk about how to win change, 5 simple steps. We're going to talk about persistence and pressure, and then do a big Q&A. So throughout the presentation, as you have questions, please type them into the chat. We will get to them at the end, and I will try not to get too distracted by them as we go along. So, and once again, Carter Lavin. Here's my book. Very excited it comes out tomorrow. So really great to spend this last day of me being not a published author with you all. So a little bit about me. I'm an activist here in Oakland, California, Ohlone Territory. Recently, I've helped win millions of dollars in new funding for street safety infrastructure. This year, we helped win $750 million in promised transit funding for transit agencies throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. In the past was part of a big effort that got the Governor Newsom to reverse cuts he was proposing for transit, winning $1 billion increase. And a year or so ago, we stopped a big fare hike. So basically, street safety, bikes, transit, I'm a big fan of all of it. I do a lot of organizing. That's a little bit about me. So please say a little bit about you. People have already been sharing their name and their town or region. And if you're up for adding in something you'd like to learn today, what got you here? There's a million things you could do with your day. It'd be nice to know a little bit of what inspired you all to join in today. Talking about effective activism teams, some of the things. Okay, great. So let's, oh, great, immediately adjacent high-speed rail. So let's get started. So there's a huge group of people here from a lot of different backgrounds, and there's so many things that you could win, so many improvements you could want. Maybe you want protected bike lanes. Maybe you want better bus stop amenities like shelters and benches. Speed bumps, always a great thing to want. Curb cuts, making your community more accessible. Maybe you hate the school drop-off line and you wish kids would be able to get there without cars or make that was easier. Or maybe you really like the high-speed rail map and you say, cool, how do we make this happen today? Or any number of other things. There's as many things to want as there are people, and in fact, there's way more. Good news is you can make them a reality. I know it feels daunting. I know it can feel so far that what you want is so far from reality, but step one, you can make it happen. And in the transportation world, it's actually kind of a simple formula. There are people who have the authority and power to enact the change. There are people who can say, yes, let's make that bench. And when they say yes, and when they follow through, you actually get what you want. Then that change becomes reality. So just kind of, when we're talking about bike lanes or high-speed rails or all this stuff, it does boil down to when the officials who are in charge of approving, funding, designing, and building the stuff actually say yes, and they follow through, then you win the change you want. And it's not, and it's not the most, shocking formula in the world. And so the real question then is like, okay, well, how can you influence those decisions? What can you, the people listening in, the people reading the book, how can you actually make them make the right decisions? With a caveat, I see that there's a lot of people here who work for cities or work for departments of transportations. We are going to talk about that section of that for the people who work at government agencies. We're going to talk about that more in the Q&A. This is mainly, for the first part, we're going to talk about folks from who are kind of outside that official process. So let's dive in. How can you influence these decisions? Well, politics is made of people. People built our transportation system. People are trying to either change or maintain it. The other day I was talking to a reporter and they said, well, the city said blank. It's like, well, the city doesn't actually say anything. There are people who are elected, who have jobs, and those people say something. So the question is, who are those people? What are they saying? Elected officials, government staffers, business owners, all these folks, they're people. So when someone says, oh, we can't possibly abolish parking minimums here, the businesses would go insane, they'd flip out. You say, okay, well, who are the businesses? Who are the people? You can't talk to a business, you can talk to a person. And the decisions that these people make affect the world around them, and we can influence those decisions. Much like you influence the decisions of the people in your life when you're saying, hey, do you want to get Chinese food for dinner or get pizza or whatever, stay in, you're influencing the people's decisions. You're part of that process. A lot of the stuff applies just when we're talking about politics. It gets a little bit more complicated. And influencing people's decisions takes power. This is a quote, one of my favorite quotes in the book from Laura Chu Wiens, who's an extremely effective transportation advocate in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who said, when it comes to winning, quote, it doesn't matter if you're right. It never matters if you're right. You just have to have the power to win the thing. Beyond helping motivate our side, being right has never helped us win anything. And that is a tough, before I go on, I know, I do a lot of transportation advocacy. This is a really tough thing for folks to absorb sometimes. For some people here, you're saying, yeah, I get that. For some folks, this is hard. This is why the first chapter of my book, If You Want to Win, You've Got to Fight, really just focuses in on this, because the stuff we want is right. Traffic safety is good. Kids being killed walking to school, being hit by cars is bad. We are right to want that to be changed. And that isn't enough for us to win. If all it took was being right, we'd have the world we want. But it takes power. And so the good news is that building power and winning change is something we can all do. It is a learnable skill. And so we're going to go through each of these slowly in a moment, but just want to kind of lay them all out for you to see. There's 5 steps. First, you got to define the change you want. You have to actually say, I don't want just more goodness. I want specifically this intersection to be converted into a plaza for people and closed to cars. You have to identify the decision makers. I want this thing. Here are the people who can make it happen. Step 3, you got to make a plan, choosing your tools, crafting your message. I want this thing. Here are the people who can make it happen. To get them to do their decision, I need to do X, Y, and Z. I need to get them this way, and here's the language that I'm going to use that's going to help. Step 4, get more people involved. It doesn't matter that you want something. I mean, it's great that you want something. When it comes to decision maker, they're going to want to see that a lot more people want that too. And then you actually have to hold the decision maker accountable. So if you do all of those things, you show that everyone's on your side and you're really, what you want is really popular, and the decision maker says no to you or snubs you or ignores you, you need to do something to enact political consequences or electoral consequences on that person's life. Or else what you show them is you do all that stuff and you have absolutely no teeth. You do need to hold them accountable. And we'll talk a lot more about that. So let's talk about defining what you want, because there's a lot of things you can want, as we've seen in the chat. There's so many different types of things. Looking at this picture, for example, there's at least 6 things that I can see that I would want change in this. And there are some people on this call who might be seeing this picture and they say, wow, they've got sidewalks, they've got a paved road, they have clear striping. This is amazing. How do I get to that level? There's a million things to want. And you can want different types of changes. Maybe you want faster trains or more bus shelters or better transfers or bike lanes or better behaved drivers. Maybe you want a large number of changes. Maybe you want not just one crosswalk, but you want 1,000 crosswalks. The more that you can define this and the more that you can help separate out your kind of big bundle of desires into discrete, specific kind of grocery shopping list items, the easier of a time you're going to have. Because you're not going to necessarily fight for all these things all at once, although you could. And we could talk about that in a second. But the more specific you can get, the easier time you're going to have of talking to other people about it. You're articulating not just this vision, but a to-do list. A good thing, especially for those of you who are seeing this and you're like, well, I have a really long to-do list. I have a lot of things I want. You can fight for more than one thing at a time. I, at this moment, am involved with at least 5 different campaigns, which is, I would say, slightly on the excessive side of things. But multiple campaigns can reinforce each other. When you are fighting multiple fights at once and you set it up the right way, you actually will have an easier time doing this. So, for example, you have, there's the general public, and this is a shot for my book. One big eye-catching campaign is a great way to draw people in. The big, we want free buses everywhere, or we want every kid to be able to walk to school safely, all that kind of big stuff. That drives a lot of people in. That also gets a lot of volunteers, which makes it a lot easier when you have something that's maybe a less sexy campaign. For example, one of the street safety groups I'm involved in, is working on changing fire code, because fire code in my city is an impediment to bike infrastructure. That is not exactly the sexiest campaign in the world to pass out flyers around fire code changing. But when you have the big exciting campaign, that does make it easier to start shifting people into other campaigns. And then you could press on both decision makers. So, you can have multiple things that you want. You could fight for them at the same time. It's not either or, it's both. It's just a question how you do it. And if you're having a hard time getting more specific, my book, particularly chapter 2, focuses in on how to help you generate more ideas for this, or help you refine your ideas. So this is a table from it, and just an example of what are a pain point. You might say, all of this is miserable. My whole commute makes me miserable. And it's okay, well, what about it? Let's get specific. And you might say, oh, don't get me started. It's okay, write a voice note, do a voice to text, get specific, complain about everything. Complaining is a wonderful part of the idea generation process. So, thinking through all these types of things. And when you're talking with your allies, getting their ideas, because there's so many things to fight and so many things to fix. Then you have to ID the decision makers. So you've identified what you want fixed, someone's in charge of that, or multiple people. So for example, if it's something that costs money or needs a policy change, you're generally talking about a legislative body, which is to say a city council, county supervisor, state legislators, people who pass laws, people who what they do is they write stuff down, they bang, they go to a vote, they bang a gavel, and now there's a new law. So, if you say, well, I want to lower the speed limit, it's like, okay, that's a policy change. A different thing that you might be dealing with is something that takes a government agency or a staff to enact. Then you need the administrative leaders. So, for example, maybe your city has already said, hey, parking policy is done through our Department of Transportation or Public Works. You say, okay, well, I need then the head of Public Works to make this decision. This could be mayors, this could be governors, this could be department heads. Generally speaking, it's going to be a mix of some of these things. But once you know who can make it happen, then it's time to focus in on that person. Because once again, these are people, they have names, they have, you can find them, they're out in the world. So you got to make a plan. And your plan might be complicated, but the more streamlined you make it, the easier time you're going to have. So some of the questions to consider while you're making your plan, which chapters 2 and 3 and a bit of 4 and 6 of my book talk about, is there an official process or a timeline? Maybe there is your county is doing a repaving policy for the large county arterials. And you say, okay, great. I need to make sure we are engaging at these specific meetings as part of it. When and where and how can you weigh in as part of that? Very importantly, how can you influence the process from outside of those official channels? What's happening inside the official process is kind of like what's happening on stage, but so many things happen backstage. Just because you get 500 people to give public comment in favor of your thing and only one person who shows up gives public comment against it doesn't mean you're automatically going to win, especially if the decision makers already have their mind made up. And so the stuff that you do outside of that process helps it so that when the time the decision maker is sitting at the dais or at the chair or whatever, that they're already thinking about you. So make sure you're engaging outside of the official process. But you might say, yeah, Carter, that's great, but my city doesn't have a policy or a monthly thing where they talk about which streets to rip up and convert into linear parks. So how do I get that on the radar? And it's like, well, you need to then basically generate enough policy pressure and political strength to put it on the agenda, to say, hey, mayor, there should be a process. Hey, mayor, hey, governor, high county, city council members, like, we want you to pass a policy to start this process. We'd like to remove a freeway. Please pass a law to start the study of it. And I know studies aren't the most fun thing in the world, but studies are a great way to get a big thing started. And a big part of that plan also involves studying your area's political and your cultural and your historical context, which chapter 3 of my book very much focuses on, because the thing that you want might be with outside your community's technical capabilities right now. And so you understanding that makes it a lot easier for you to say, okay, but here's what they can do. Yes, maybe my community doesn't have a budget for concrete, or they do, but maybe they don't have a whatever tool. It's like, okay, can they just block off a road with some cones or set up some bollards or planters to block it off? Like, what is easy, what is hard? Same thing goes historically and culturally as well. Because these contexts can like supercharge what you're working on. If you say, well, take this, this urban freeway destroyed a ton of communities and people are really mad about it. It's like, okay, well, tapping into that historic context will make it easier for you to win the change you want. Other things, there might be historical or cultural context that's going to really hinder what you're going for. And so understanding your kind of battlefield makes your life a lot easier. Then as you do this, you need to choose your tactics. Here's a screenshot of a petition that this was early days in that petition. It got a little bit more signers than that, about winning a bus only lane in the San Jose area, which is, making its way through the progress. But you got to choose your tools. How are you going to show that your demand is popular? It's great that you want it, got to have more people on your side. And so petitions are an excellent tool for this. Petitions are an excellent tool. Coalition letters, which are just basically a petition, but instead of having an individual signing on saying, here's what we want, you have groups. So all sorts of organizations signing on. Rallies show you're popular. It says, hey, here's me and 500 friends, getting a lot of phone calls in, public comments, media coverage, special events, protests, things like that. Lots and lots of ways to show that your demand is popular. And you don't need to do all these things. You do need to do some things to show that what you're doing is popular. And each of these has a strength and a weakness. Chapter 7 of my book is entirely about tactics, which is what these are. So if you're less familiar with some of these words, or you're really interested in how you can kind of daisy chain them together, I strongly recommend chapter 7. And so you say, okay, great. So I know what I want. I want I want to be able to take my bike on the buses. I want the bus agency to have bike racks at the front. Okay, cool. I know who can make that happen. I know how I'm going to show popular support. How do I craft the message? What do I actually need to write? So there's a first question of what your message is. What are you going to say? Helping your audience understands how this connects to them is so important. And especially in our space, I forgot to underline this 20 million times, but you have to use commonly understood words. You all are as wonderful people, you 90 something people who are here now at this Next City Talk, who reads Next City things. You are specialists. You might not feel like that, but you are. You know all sorts of words that people in your community don't know. And that's great. It is good to know these things, but that does mean you do have to translate this. So for example, almost no one in your community knows what a bollard is. People do know what a metal post that prevents cars from killing people is. People don't, I mean, people might know a speed bump, other forms of like traffic calming, like what is traffic calming? And so as part of how you do this, you do have to make your language accessible, much like how if you are talking to people who only speak English, you should speak English. If you're talking to people who don't know this entire vocabulary, don't use this vocabulary. You have to do that translation work. At the same time, a big part of crafting your message is how you say it. And especially in our community, it's really easy for us to have all sorts of different tone of how we talk about it. Coming from the traffic safety world, it is reasonable and understandable when you're a traffic safety activist and you say, my friend was killed and my mayor did nothing. I'm furious. Here's the petition that evokes my fury. Not saying that's right, not saying that's wrong, but an important thing is to be very aware of how your tone plays out. And that also conveys differently across the medium. So if you're doing it in print or flyers or video, how you say it really matters. And how you say and what you say is going to shift throughout your campaign because the situation will shift. And this then goes into who are you saying it to? So who are the different audiences and how are you tailoring your message to each audience? So for example, I'm helping lead, I'm one of the many, many leaders on this effort in the San Francisco Bay Area's 5 big counties to save transit. We are reaching out to all sorts of organizations, a wide variety of organizations about it. And, some organizations care a lot about the climate aspect of transit. Some organizations couldn't care less. Talk to people about what they care about, and they're going to be a lot more interested. And a great thing about all of what we are doing, all of what you want, is what you want connects to what other people care about. You have to connect to them. What you want connects to what other people care about. And so it's about connecting with them on their values. Which then brings us to actually getting other people involved. So step 4, get more people involved. This is a shot from my book. If you want to win, you've got to fight. This is what's called the ladder of engagement. It is a concept that's been around for a very long time. I am not the originator of this. Big shout out to Fern, who did a great job depicting this. But in your campaign, you're going to want to get more people involved. A lot of supporters, people who are actually doing stuff like signaling support for the campaign, not just folks who are giving you a thumbs up in your private life, but people who are doing something publicly demonstrable to others. You're going to want to get a lot of volunteers, people who are helping do the work of the campaign, people who are rolling up their sleeves. Maybe that's people who are circulating the petition, people editing your petition, people helping draft the petition. And you're going to need leaders, especially if you're doing a larger campaign. You're going to need a lot of leaders. And leaders are people who are, taking the campaign to a new level, people who are um, able to expand the campaign's horizons. So, for example, a leader might be someone who says, "Look, I love this idea for better bus service in our campaign. We should talk to the businesses. I'm going to go talk to all the businesses about it." You say, "Great, that frees me up to talk to the other groups about this." Um, the supporters show that your demand is popular, and the other groups help share the workload because there's a lot of work in these campaigns. And this is a lot. I know it's been half an hour. I'm talking a little fast. There's a lot to do. You can't do it alone. You absolutely cannot do it all by yourself, especially if you're aiming for really big stuff. And so you need to build this network of helpers. Your job is actually you're the campaign director. Congratulations on your promotion. So your role is not to do everything. You don't have to be the one person band. Your role is to make sure that what needs to get done actually gets done. So, for example, if one of the things that needs doing is alerting the press, your role is to make sure that the press gets the announcement. And maybe that's through saying, "Hi, volunteers, can someone write a press release? Can someone edit the press release that I made a really crummy first draft of? Who's up for helping build out the media list?" Making sure that stuff actually gets done. Big flag though, until other people take ownership, until you can get others to take ownership of something, it is your responsibility to do it or it's not going to get done. And this is a, common aspect of a lot of political organizing where for a person, you might be the kind of person who says, "It's so much work to get help, I'll just do it myself." And that might be true for one thing or two things, but getting other people to help you and doing the work of bringing other people in to help is essential to avoid burnout in the long term for getting more people in. And even if that means you have to go a little bit slower at the start than you want to, that does make your campaign so much stronger and so much more able to do more things in the long run. So it is worth bringing the volunteers in, working with them, doing it with them, and it's even more worth it the bigger your campaign goes. So some people, chapter 4 of my book talks a lot more about this. I know for some people, the concept of asking for help can feel really hard, or working with others can feel really hard. Chapter 4 is very much for you. And you need to get more than your people on your side. Headline, bus riders want more funding for buses is assumed. That is not a front page article. That's not, no one's going to say, "Stop the presses. Oh my God, did you hear bus riders want more bus funding? Oh my goodness." It's like, yeah, no, no, duh. That's, you do need to demonstrate that. You do need to do that work, but that is kind of assumed. That's not going to get an elected official to like stop what they're doing and dramatically drop their cup of coffee as they say, "What?" If you say 100,000 bus riders, then they're like, "Wait, what?" And so getting more people involved is really key to getting more attention and getting more a different range of groups together and united in the goal is what's called a coalition, which chapter 5 of my book focuses on. And so, for example, here is a shot of a coalition letter that I helped assemble as part of a street safety campaign I did in Oakland, my town. And this coalition had environmental groups, disability justice groups of a range of them, the Catholic Church, a couple of different bike groups, anti-police terror project, wonderful group, a skate park group, a refugee and immigrant rights group, nurses union, teachers union, the Democrats, two different Democratic clubs, and a couple other groups. That gets some attention. That helps the mayor and the elected officials say, "Oh, this isn't just the bike people thing. This is an everybody thing." And so a huge part about getting more people involved, a big advantage that we as transportation advocates have is it's actually pretty easy to guess who might be interested. It's the people, the people on the bus probably want better bus service. The people who are, you know, maybe yes or no, depending on your community, the people on bikes right now probably want better bike service. The people waiting for the bus, the people trying to cross the street, finding there's a lot of potential partners to find out there. And as I talked about more in chapter 5, when we're talking about finding coalition partners, other groups to bring into the effort, transportation issues, biking, walking, bus, transit, high-speed rail, parking, this impacts a ton of other groups: businesses, youth groups, seniors, people with disabilities, tourism agencies, public health, climate, labor, housing, faith-based groups, so many things get impacted. And so when you're looking at who to partner with, one, just identifying those other groups in your community is a great place to start. And then when you're getting specific, thinking, okay, well, who else benefits from this change? There's this thing that you want, it makes your life better. Who else benefits? Like, well, if there's more bus service to that, along this corridor, the businesses along that corridor get more business customers. I should talk to those people. Another part, which is slightly different, chapter 5 delves into this more, is this question of whose values align with your change. So, for example, maybe there's a faith-based group that doesn't necessarily think of themselves as people who will directly benefit from, a lot more crosswalks in your town. But as people of faith, maybe they are pro people not getting killed by cars. And so they say, look, yes, my street already has a crosswalk, but I'm still on board with this because it aligns with my values. And a big caveat or a big thing to remember about this is no group is fully united. There's a lot of associations, there's a lot of like groups of groups. They're not fully unified. So, for example, if the business association says that they don't like your thing, talk to the individual businesses. They might support it. The business association, the local chamber of commerce, they say they talk for everybody, but it's not like when you say, hey, local chamber of commerce, I want to talk to you about bus boarding islands, and they say, we don't like bus boarding islands. The head of the association or the policy person you talk to didn't go and survey every single person in their group. They just said their feelings based off maybe their conversations. You can go talk to every one of the people in their membership and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this. What do you think? So just something to keep in mind. There's a couple of asterisks about how to do that in a I'm being recorded in a polite way, in a way that's not going to cause service or dyspepsia, like that's not going to cause some issues. We could talk about more in the Q&A if someone wants to delve into that particular aspect. And then lastly, you actually have to hold decision maker accountable. So this is a shot from a few years back when me and my coalition delivered 1,000 petition signatures and the coalition letter demanding safer streets in our community. We had to our city council president, who is now a county supervisor. We have a reporter there. We have a ton of people. We're in her face. We're like right there in her space. And so we had to deliver the demands. You can't just say, oh, I made a petition. They probably see it. You have to, these people are physical people in the world. Physically get the demands in front of them. Show them the crowd. Help them see that what you're doing is popular. Because anyone can make a website that has, not, but like you can make a website that says, wow, 100 bajillion people signed my petition. And your mayor is rightly able to be like, that's probably not relevant. Like you need to show this to them. And a great way to turn up the pressure is putting them in the spotlight, getting them on the record, having this kind of dramatic moment. Maybe there's media there or maybe you're just live streaming it on your phone or having someone else, like having this moment and get them on the record. And maybe they say no, or maybe they ignore you. So in that event, try using different approaches. Maybe you did a delivery at a city council meeting and they didn't respond or they ignored you. They said you weren't on the agenda. Go find them at their office. Maybe you need to reframe your message so it aligns with their values. You change your approach. Maybe you need to apply more pressure through different means. Maybe you need to do stronger messaging. For example, a few years ago, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, was proposing to kill transit throughout the state of California. He was proposing taking away billions of dollars in transit throughout California. And throughout that entire year before that, I think it's 100,000, tens of thousands of people called his office. We had lots of coalition letters sent in. All these different types of folks were doing it. And Gavin Newsom was still proposing killing transit and stealing billions of dollars away from transit. And the message just wasn't going through. And so the campaign, broadly speaking, not saying I was any of these people, the campaign, broadly speaking, recognized like we need to get this message a lot clearer. And so one way that they sent a very strong, clear message was they did a transit funeral with cardboard trains and things like that. That made international news. My book talks about that specifically as well. And another thing is towards the end, there was this moment where Gavin Newsom, which is a person dressed as Gavin Newsom, took a baseball bat and beat the stuffing out of a Caltrain cardboard box thing. And that they made sure that there was a big sign, and they were doing this while blocking the entrance to a freeway. And they made sure there was a big sign that said Gavin Newsom is killing transit, so that when the people who are stuck in cars as traffic were saying like, geez, traffic's really terrible today. Why is traffic so bad? They knew, oh, traffic's terrible because Gavin Newsom is killing transit. Got it. Okay. That along with everything else, it's not one tactic does it all. It is the ecosystem of tactics really helps shift the conversation. Another part is maybe you need more compelling messengers. Maybe you aren't the person to have that conversation with the elected official or the decision maker. I'm not always the right person to have that conversation with my mayor. Gavin Newsom doesn't want to talk to me. And so sometimes you need to find a more compelling messenger. Maybe you put more attention, media, events. A big part, though, flashing huge lights, warning, which I talk about more in chapter 7, you have to escalate based on what the elected official is doing. So, for example, this campaign didn't start with Gavin Newsom's killing transit, because people will be like, what the heck are you talking about? That came after as a culmination of months of effort of community organizing of tens of thousands of people getting the word so that the story was already out there. And so, and then it kind of got to the point where like Gavin Newsom wasn't, ignoring or neglecting, got to the point where, oh, he was killing transit. And so that message and that escalation fit the moment. Um, this is a particularly tricky thing in the world of traffic violence, anti-traffic violence organizing. And so we can talk more about that in the Q&A if you want to get into the details. But chapter 7 of my book, the one about tactics, talks a lot more specifically about escalation because it's important to get that right. And sometimes they say yes to you. Sometimes you do all this stuff and politicians say yes, and sometimes they do that and nothing changes. Uh, so confirm that they actually follow through. Sometimes politicians say one thing, but they do another thing. Big shock. So actually confirm they follow through. The other thing to keep in mind is these people aren't all powerful. They operate as part of this like ecosystem of other decision makers. And so maybe your mayor said sure, but the city council voted them down. Or maybe your state rep did draft up a bill, but they couldn't get anyone else to vote for it. Your role is to make sure, as a campaign director, is make sure what needs to get doing gets done. So look for the bottleneck and work to solve it. Basically, you kind of rinse and repeat, you copy all this stuff, and now you focus on the next target type of thing. So to recap before we get to the Q&A, you can win the changes you want to see. You can win the changes. Got to pick a clear goal, got to rally others to support it. You got to push, 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 stay persistent, try new things, experiment, try new approaches, celebrate your progress along the way. And if you want help doing that and you would like this written down rather than me talking at you for a little bit, if you want to win, you got to fight. A Guide to Effective Transportation Advocacy is available for pre-order at islandpress.com/fight. You can get a discount, 20% off with discount code FIGHT. Today's the last day you can pre-order it because tomorrow it officially comes out. So you can't pre-order it, you can just order it. And with that, I'm going to go into Q&A. And so I think,
Oh,
Melissa, there's probably some questions I came through, so I'll kick it to you.
no worries. And thank you so much for that amazing presentation. I know folks are curious about knowing if they could have the slides sent to them.
Yeah, I will send it to you as the view thing, and
Amazing.
I trust you to do good stuff with it.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. All right, so let's see. I know Next City typically has a lot of people who work in different agencies, sometimes Department of Transportation. So I kind of want to start with this question. For someone who works at a dot and feels as if they're the only one who cares about transit and street safety, how can they be more successful at getting the agency to do good things?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and especially yeah. So in chapter 5 of my book, like really hones in specifically on this. And there's two things. It's a huge question. There's two big things to keep in mind. One is what can they do within the like confines of their job, and what are the different ways that they can do their job in such a way that kind of helps shift the scales. And then the other one is how can they work better with the people who are outside of the process to collaborate in a way that is um, not going to get them fired or is at least secret, so they don't get in too much trouble. So for the first one, my favorite example of this is when you are at these in these departments, there's a ton of decisions you get to make, and you get to shift the conversation in all these like subtle ways. My absolute favorite one is when people have to do like a parking analysis about saying, "Oh, there's going to be a bike lane. How many beautiful, blessed parking spots does this terrible, nasty bike lane destroy?" Uh, and you get to say, "Okay, well, what's the area that we care about?" And it is a hugely different number if you say, here's the number of parking spots along this bike lane corridor versus here's the number of parking spot among within 1 block of this bike lane or within a quarter of a mile of this bike lane. And you could say, here's the number of parking spots. 3 people have died on this corridor in the last 10 years. So we are looking at a lives to parking spot ratio of this. And like, there's all these different ways that you're like, look, I'm just answering the question. This is just the data. You asked for data, mayor, city council member, boss. Here's the way of doing it. And so you can suggest that data and kind of keeping in mind what that looks like is a big part. And, especially when doing surveys, having a no build option, there's a lot of things you could do there. The other part is kind of getting to know your colleagues outside of this, having a cup of coffee with them, getting to chat with them, because that you can feel alone when you don't know other people, but you might not actually be alone. And so kind of getting that sense of that, getting to know who they are as people, invite them for a bike ride, see what
Mm.
happens. Um, and maybe they say no, but like you're able to kind of push the envelope a little bit that is still very much within the confines of your job. And then on the outside, there's a bunch of hooligans like myself outside of the official process in your town who probably want all sorts of things. Maybe you know them as the people who yell at you sometimes and you want to scream back at them, yes, I don't have a magic wand. I'm just a cog and I'm sorry. I wish I could say yes. Um, Meet them outside of the context of work. Go to a happy hour, go to a green drinks, whatever type of thing. Get to know some folks. Some of these people are not going to, some people really like yelling at staff and they're not going to be the people to work with, but you will find someone who is more open to receiving this great gift that you're giving. And, I'm not saying you're like sending them secret files and it's signal messages and encrypted
Mhm.
passcodes, but even just saying like, oh, hey, did you like, oh, hey, the city's looking at doing this thing in the next couple of months, just putting that on your radar. Or, oh, yeah, just heads up, we got this request. It's public information because everything I do is public. Did you know we got this request from the business lobby to tear down every bus shelter or whatever? Just the amount of like gossip or intel sharing that you could just kind of casually do is pretty astronomical and extremely helpful for the folks on the outside. And chapter 6 of the book focuses a lot on how to make these dynamics work, um, and how to do it appropriately. Yeah, so there's a whole lot more to say, but those are the kind of the big those are the big ones.
Gotcha. Awesome. We also have a question from Ryan Greenlaw. He's asking, any thoughts about building effective coalitions to effectuate positive community change, especially when priorities and stakeholders may differ across organizations?
Yeah, so great question. Chapter 5, very much for you. So coalitions are an essential part of winning. And to your point about like, oh, there's different priorities and different stakeholders, that is inherent to a coalition. Like um that is what makes it a coalition. If there weren't different priorities or different goals, you'd actually just be one group. And so keeping that in mind that like the point of the coalition is to say, look, we are here, we agree on this one thing, and so we are here to make progress on this one thing. Maybe there's two things. And depending on your community and your community's specific like political, cultural, historical context, people might come to the idea of coalitions like really differently. Um, and so chapter 5 of my book really talks about kind of two different styles of coalition building. But a big part is just getting to know people and figuring out where is that point of intersection. Saying, hey, look, you might hate everything about me except for the fact that I don't want kids in our community to be killed. Can we talk about that? And maybe they say, I don't care about that, or I hate you too much to talk about that. You're like, okay, cool, I'm going to talk to somebody else. but like finding what those points of overlap are and focusing on that. And I think that, that takes a little bit of discipline, but a wonderful thing about coalitions are that those like disagreements are inherent to them. So you're coming in and they're coming in with the understanding that like they might fundamentally disagree with you about a couple of things, or they have no interest because they're the business lobby or they're a faith-based organization and that's not your faith, but you're like, cool, but we agree that this. Okay, let's work on that. And by having a space where like, yes, we are here to put aside those disagreements and work on this thing in such a way. I will say there's the caveat, the big kind of caveat about this is it's really important to align on values first, especially because we live in a very tumultuous political age. There's fascists all around, and that does interact with the bike and the transportation and the street safety world. Like that is not what's happening in DC is not totally separate from what happens in your community, and it is kind of wild how much it does come into play. And so a big part is finding people who like do fundamentally agree with you about like what you are talking about. Of like, I want more people in our community to get around easier. Some people's stance is, I don't want more people in my community, period. Okay, cool. They're not probably your allies. Go find other folks. Um, and then lastly, I think there was a point about like joy or connection with them, making personal connections with them. So you probably all like French fries. Maybe you don't say, hey, let's go to a French fry party or whatever, but like it's a holiday, drop off a box of cookies, like make friends. That makes this all a lot easier too.
So we have a really great question here. It seems a little simple, but like simple is also sometimes some of the best things we could have. And at Next City, we love the idea of sharing solutions.
Hmm.
So this person is asking, is there any sort of national or national organization or group or listserv that folks could join forces on? Tucson, Arizona has a lot of fabulous ideas and activists, but it would be great to be able to consult with others from across the country as questions arise. So yeah, do you know
Yeah.
of any just like broad digital communities where folks can kind of share these ideas about transportation advocacy?
Yeah. So I'll put my email in the chat. Hit me up. There's some sorry, there's a couple of different ones. I don't have like full permission to invite everyone into the club. Well, one, you can always make one. You can always say, hey folks, here's the group, here's the thing. Like here's the Slack. There's like a Slack channel where it's like leaders of various like bike and street safety, and I think generally transit groups are in. Seth Bush of Bike Pittsburgh has been like, and a person from Cleveland have been like assembling like I think it's a monthly or quarterly call. There's like the National Campaign for Transit Justice. They're around, like there are groups and things like that. Um, so if you want to get plugged in and share some lessons, shoot me an email. Let's talk, and I'll happily invite you into the things that I have permission to invite people into, and I will double check with the other folks to make sure I have permission to invite folks into. Yeah.
Okay, another question that I have here. Do you have any advice from when your advocacy may have pushed too far and alienate a mayor, and now they don't want to work with you anymore?
Yes. I am being recorded. Not a mayor. Yeah. So that's a good question. I haven't gotten that one yet. So really good job of pointing your finger on like, is there a really tender part where that? So short answer is yes. And the uh I think the 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 I guess I don't even need to explain what, oh no, I should explain what the point of tension was. I was talking to folks in the city administration about a particular conflict that we were having with the community in that. And I kind of had laid out like, here's all the things that the community has done to help fix this problem, to be collaborative. And we're still not getting what we want. And so here's the solutions as I understand them. Like here are the pathways that we have left forward to us. And it was sort of like, help me have better pathways. Like we need you all to bend a little bit more, because right now it's starting to become it's like, if there's an unmovable obstacle, then we have to just move the obstacle out of the way. And that was viewed as a little too much. um and in retrospect, that was a bit too much on my part, and that is something just like I'm a very large white man, and if I am saying certain things and I gesticulate widely or whatever, like even though I might feel a certain way about me, like that can come across a little bit more intense than intended. And so, I sent an apology, was all good, and made sure that it's a nice part about coalition allies is like other people in the group continue the conversation, like in other parts. And like a great part about it's not all on you is there might be a part where your group or you personally or someone does something and then now like a feeling got hurt and at the end of the day we're all just people. We're like, okay, well, here's you know here's a fruit basket, here's an apology note, and more importantly, here's this other person who's going to say the exact same things I was going to say, but with a smile, and you don't have and without the emotional baggage. So you're talking about that. Um, so yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And then I think the other kind of part is, you know, when it comes to alienating mayors, which I haven't had the joyous experience of doing. One thing that I really want people to remember is a lot of times when people are like, "Oh, well, my mayor hates me no matter what," it's like, okay, cool, then alienate them. Like, then pick the fight. Like, if your mayor is going to spit in your face no matter what you're asking for, ask for the big thing, do the big fight, build a big power, and have that contention while demonstrating yourself to be the second biggest jerk in the situation. So the important thing is to not be the first biggest jerk. Um, you want someone to witness who's witnessing to be like, oh, you are the sympathetic person. I'm now mad at this mayor. But especially if you're in an area where you feel like, oh, winning is so impossible, like make the relationships, but build the power. Don't be so afraid of like, at the end of the day, they're there because your community voted for them. So as long as you are popular and big, they're the ones who should feel a little bit icky about the conversation.
Great. And thank you, Catherine, for in the chat dropping a few recommendations for kind of national organizations that folks could connect with. I see National Freeway Fighters, America
Hmm.
Walks, and Strong Towns. So if you're curious about those kind of national organizations to share ideas and solutions with, there are a few right there.
Hmm.
We have a question from Michael Charles Howard. We created a P3 type TOD coalition of private mixed use commercial, affordable housing, and nonprofit workforce training and services to complement a BRT corridor upgrade. Partners include Ohio State, Goodwill, City of Columbus, Franklin County. While I have led this project as an ED, I'm out of my depth and pulling it all together. We need insights and support to mold and submit the ask. What would you suggest is the organizing blueprint to win city, state, and federal funding?
So yeah, Michael, huge question, great question. My book, very much for you. um, so sorry, let me pull up the question itself because it's such a
Yes.
doozy of a question. Ah, so talking about like out of your depth, when you feel like you're out of the depth, you're like, this is just so many parts, this is so many things going on. A, a big thing to recognize is these people, your other coalition partners are here to help you do the work. Like you're not their boss. You can't say, hey, Ohio State, the Ohio State, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. But if you say, hey, folks, I'm not, this is like a whole thing, this is a lot of stuff, I don't have enough, can like someone, we need help, let's figure this out. um, because the whole thing shouldn't rely on you because you're a COVID infection, a car crash, other life event, maybe you fall in love and move to Hawaii. Like, who knows? Like, your campaign shouldn't wholly rely on you. And so a big part is bringing in more help. And
Mhm.
I'm so glad, Michael, that you're able to open up to us here about like that kind of difficulty. Opening up to your other coalition partners, your other groups, like it's so many people to manage. And the good news is that means there's more people there to manage it. So focusing on that is going to, I think, really help you a lot. And then when it comes to kind of organizing city state funding, federal funding, a big part is like building out the mass numbers of folks. Like your senator doesn't isn't going to care until you get certain number of people involved, a certain wide range of groups, things like that. And the more kind of that you view what you're doing as, use a board game phrase like engine building, that you're like, oh, all the stuff we're doing is to get as many, I think you're in Ohio, yeah, like as many Ohioans, as many people in my community to care about this stuff, to do this stuff. And then occasionally we like send 100,000 letters to this elected official, or occasionally we do this a big event and we invite all of them in. But if you focus, like what we're doing is we're just building this like huge mass of people who care about this thing, and then everything else is like where you plug them into. I find that personally that makes it a lot easier to deal with like the inherent complexities of some of these campaigns, which some person asked about this of like, some campaigns take a month. Like some of these are like real short, fast, boom. Like the stop on the campaign we won to stop bus fare hikes was, I think, a course of a week. Like that was a really sudden, like it came up, we slapped it down,
Amazing.
campaign was over. Some of these campaigns are multiple years.
Mhm.
So like if you think about what you're doing as kind of the act of building community, building kind of power in this sense, and that a bunch of other things come up as part of it, I find that easier to, like, you're like, oh, I'm just doing one thing, which is a way of lying to yourself in a certain way. And that's how you end up doing all these different types of campaigns at once.
Awesome. And I see we're pretty much at time, but I do want to pose one more question before we wrap up. I'm sorry to everyone for the questions that we couldn't get to. Obviously, we only have an hour here, but I appreciate everyone's questions. But what the last question I want to pose to you, Carter, um,
Hmm.
the phrase "Our liberation is bound up together" appears in the introduction of your book. How do you see transportation justice connecting to broader movements for climate, labor, and housing?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And transportation's an everyone issue. Even if you don't, even if you never leave your house, things still come to your house. Things still transport to you. So there is no, as I talk about in the book in chapter one, there is no outside of this. There is no non-politics. There is no disengagement. And so that means when you are working on transportation issues, especially in America, in the United States, you have the ability to collaborate with all sorts of other things. You can say, okay, well, my bus is late. Why is my bus late? It's like, oh, my bus is late because the time schedule is so intense that the workers who maybe don't have a union or maybe they do, they're getting just squeezed to death by management. And so that means when they take their break, they like their break is unscheduled, and so we have an unrealistic schedule. And so you have this moment. You could say, okay, well, maybe I'll be a huge jerk to the workers, which is bad. Don't do that. Or you say, I see that the issue is management has set up unrealistic schedules. So how do we fix that? And you could say, oh, and management set up unrealistic schedules because they don't have money from the state, they don't have money from the county. How do we get more resources in to fix this? And so all of a sudden, what you want is bound up with the bus operator who just needs a restroom break. And that's just one example of how it's this opportunity to have this kind of collective liberation, and how that also does mean going beyond typical like victim perpetrator mentality of like, oh, it's not just management sucks, unions are wonderful. It's saying, okay, well, management maybe they do suck in your situation. Your community's your community. That's why chapter 3 is for you. But like maybe people are trying their best and their resources are limited, and you as the activist is able to step in and say, cool, we want more resources to make this a lot easier. And this comes up over and over and over again in transportation issues. And so there are people who come to transportation not because they have any interest in the broader things like that, but it can very much be a vessel of community unification, of bringing folks together, of healing great divides and ruptures and harms. And so if you can, it's a very nice bonus feature to do. And we our issues are not generally the most sexy, eye-catching, popular thing in the world. But when we bring in allies that are more established and larger and things like that, when we help our friends in all sorts of other movements understand how this impacts them, that is a lot of political power and oomph that we get to bring into the situation. So yeah, that's a pretty cool thing to do, and that's why I wrote a whole book about it, because it's a lot to do. And someone was like, well, in my community this word means a different thing. It's like, great, use a different word for your community then, as chapter 3 talks about, because you know your like these things are kind of very similar ingredients, very similar ways. How do you chop a vegetable? same regard, like kind of same thing. They're like, oh, well, I'm using a carrot. It's like, okay, slightly different thing. It's still, you need a knife and a cutting board. So, hopefully this book helps you all fight and win the changes you want to see in your community. I put the link in there. The discount code is fight. And you can reach me, Carter at carterlavin.com. Looking forward to talking with you all. And thank you, Melissa. This was great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. It was a great presentation. And everyone, the book is available for pre-order. And my background is messing this up. Y'all can see it. The book's available for pre-order. And it is actually like live and available tomorrow. So congratulations on your book, Carter.
Thank you.
Definitely check out the link that Carter shared in the chat, the Island Press link,
Mhm.
to grab a copy. And I'm going to leave the Zoom open for a little bit in case folks wanted to grab links in the chat. So you can go ahead and grab that link for Island Press to grab Carter's book. There'll be a link there as well for where you can find a recording of this webinar. And if you have any questions for me or Carter, I'll throw my email in there as well. Carter's email address is in there. Folks who are interested in getting a copy of the slide deck, feel free to reach out to me and I will get that to you. Again, Carter, thank you so much and congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Take care,
everyone.
everyone.
Mhm.